Thank you for joining our podcast. In our last podcast, we began talking about failure, specifically moral failure, and today we want to talk about performance failure. And when we talk about failure in performing, one thing that we all know is we're going to fail. Everybody fails. And so in that sense, we really want to normalize failure and begin rethinking how we see failure, rather than a criticism, a report card, not measuring up, being inadequate. It's just a learning opportunity. And if we can see failure as a learning opportunity, we can find joy in failure. When we talk about failure, one of the things we want to look at is what causes failure.
My initial focus would be developmental. Sometimes, in terms of body and brain, people are not ready for the task at hand.
So when we start thinking about why do we fail, we want to begin thinking about, are we taking on something prematurely? Are we not ready yet?
Now, part of the developmental part is practice, practice, practice. But if your body and brain are not mature enough to do the work, then you're not going to succeed. It doesn't mean don't practice, but you have to be patient with yourself when you fall short of the mark of what you aspire to.
So we're talking about really being realistic and looking at the long haul. When we want to achieve a goal, when we want to learn a new skill, when we want to reach a certain level, it's not going to happen overnight. It means we have to be willing to learn, practice, persevere, and developmentally get ready for that, whether that's physical, brain development, whatever it might be. Do you have an example of that?
Son David has been a very high performer as an adult. He was a captain in the Air Force as a physician and working with some very challenging situations in terms of working with the Special Forces. And he was awarded the Bronze Star for his work in that particular war situation. In addition to that, going through medical school, the last 2 years when you get in your rotations, he got honors straight through.
And that's part of the interesting dimension of the story. We see the end result of David's successes, but they were, in a sense, hard won.
Coming up through school, from kindergarten through 12th grade, David was the smallest kid in each class. And sometimes would even comment, "How old are you?" "I'm 16. "But you're so small." When he went for his driver's test, he had to sit on 3 pillows to see out the windshield. He decided to take on wrestling in high school. And look at his junior year, which was the last year because of moving out of town at that point to Mississippi. They didn't have wrestling there. But he had an 85% loss record. And it didn't look like he had much of a future. He actually loved wrestling. Did it for 3 years, 9th, 10th, 11th grade. Loved it. But wrestling didn't love him.
So it sure didn't seem like he would be moving toward wrestling as he entered college.
No. Through his freshman year, by the way, his aspiration was to become a physician. But his confidence waned such that he moved in a major that did not get into the sciences at all. But at the end of the freshman year, when he came home for the summer, I asked him this question: "David, what's in your heart?" He said, "I want to make the Penn State wrestling team as a walk-on, one of the top teams in the country. David, what can I do on your behalf?" "Well, help me get a job and fund me getting some training in some wrestling camps during the summer," which he did. And for some reason, that head coach saw something in David and kept him on the team.
So we begin to see David's perseverance paying off, and now enters in a head coach who rallies around him, and that continues to motivate and inspire David to keep going.
There's also an assistant coach who's from Japan, and he was a national champion in 3 different sports. David held him in high esteem. One day, that coach took David aside and said, "David, the reason I'm so tough on you is because I really believe in you." That was another turning point for him.
One. Russian tie now. The wrist control. Now is he going to go to the same side? Is he going to go for a single at the same side? Nice move. Beautiful. Beautiful move.
2 lead, and this is a match that Bloomsbury has to have.
Has to have, and a nice low single. And he turns him. All right, now, if he can catch the leg and catch the head, all right, he's got points right here.
Right? He's getting back points.
He can get back points there.
Now, what's so big about wrestling? Well, he loved it, and it was great that he was so successful in it. But how does that have to do with anything else? Well, that confidence that was built in that time, after he graduated from Penn State, he decided to go into medicine. And so he took courses at the University of Pittsburgh in the sciences. It took 4 years of study before he was accepted into medical school.
When we think of other scenarios of people, we think of good old Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we read of how many times he tried to find that secret recipe. It was an awful lot. I don't remember the number. We think of Thomas Edison and his inventions, and even currently companies that are trying to get into space apart from NASA, lots and lots of money in that, and they're failing, but they're persevering with the goal of being successful. So for all of us, when we think about failure, again, remembering that failure happens, but perseverance can build that confidence, that skill level. It can catch up developmentally to where we are, and then we can be successful. The other thing that you mentioned in the story is that team of people, the coaches and then family, of course. And so for all of us, we want to be surrounding ourselves with the team who will help us in that journey through the successes and failures, encourage us, believe in us, support us, help us recover when we're disappointed if we fail, if we've missed a mark. That's an important part as well.
I think one of the rules here is don't give up too soon. Test the waters. Give yourself a chance to really prove yourself.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, when we think of David's story again, is David had a plan. He had a vision. And that's also another very important dimension of success and getting through failure. Your famous Benjamin Franklin quote.
Benjamin Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So you need to have a vision for where you're going, but you need a plan that's realistic, that you really tested the waters for, and maybe gotten some information and feedback from your cast of thousands, the special people in your life that might see things that you would not see.
I can think of people along the way I've talked to who have a vision, aspirations, and sometimes they're big, but instead of planning, for example, I'm going to go to New York and be a Broadway star. They're going to leave next month. They have no funds saved, no apartment, no job, no nothing. Now, once in a blue moon that works out fine, but most of the time it doesn't. And that's just one example for all of us. Those aspirations and dreams are important, but we want to plan for that as well. I think of Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, and he uses the example of having really 3 concentric circles that are lined up that help us in that plan to be successful in that vision. One is identifying what we're passionate about. Secondly, what we're good at, and he used himself as an example. He loved Beethoven, listened to Beethoven with passion on the way to work, on the way home, and he really enjoyed it and was good at it. But his third circle is what's going to make you money. So he has a passion for Beethoven, he listens to Beethoven, but who's going to pay him to listen to Beethoven? So that's not a realistic plan. you have an example of a vision you had. It was something that you woke up with in the middle of the night. Talk
Yes.
about that.
That was when I was in Mississippi, quite a few years ago. And I woke up with this idea about 3 a.m. of a book that I would call Journey. It was a post-bound book where you could enter photographs and then also fill out a description of the successes and the interests and passions of your child. And I just knew this would be terrific. Now, something to keep in mind is what I think people need, they might not need, or they might need it but not want it. Within about a week, and I'm not exaggerating, I had 1,000 copies of Journey with an embossed cover with the big word Journey on it, acid-free pages where you could put your photographs and write in the successes of your child. And now I needed to get the word out. Now how am I going to do that? Well, obviously, you get a national magazine, which I did, and you get a full-page ad for Journey, goes across the country, lots and lots of people picking up this magazine. It's right inside the front cover. I couldn't wait to go to the post office, to my post office box, to take in all the requests for Journey.
And how many did you get?
You want the total over the whole time that I did the
Total number.
one.
Yeah.
I sold a national ad with an idea that I thought was absolutely terrific that people didn't seem to want.
Yeah. So that brings up the whole idea of using your resources. You woke up with that vision, and Scripture says without a vision the people die, so visions are important. But we also know sometimes when we wake up at 3 o'clock with a vision, it's not necessarily God who's giving us that
No.
vision.
And we need to consult with that cast of thousands, the people around us. And after the fact, people said, yeah, I thought that would have failed.
Yeah. So it is using that team of people that we trust and know that are for us and with us as consultants. Now sometimes people say, no, that's not a good idea, and we're still persuaded and we do it and it turns out great, and that's okay. But start by using your resources well and be discerning. We think of different scenarios where people had a dream and people squashed those dreams and they continued moving forward and became very successful. So we don't want to allow others to unduly influence us if that's not where we're going, but we want to at least be willing to give it counsel and hear it.
Yes.
The other thing that we want to talk about for 1 minute is how to handle failure when it does happen. Because we can sit here and be academic and talk in theory, but in reality, when things don't work out, we do feel disappointed. And often if we've tried many times and we still haven't reached a level of success, we feel defeated. That doesn't necessarily mean we should quit, but it's painful. And again, we need those encouragers on our team to help us in the journey. And sometimes we have to accept loss. Sometimes we learn from the experience, but we're not going to reach the goals and the aspirations we set out for. We sometimes have to recover from that. There can be grief in that. And that is part of failure as well. It's not all just persevering and success.
I think there needs to be an analysis. God calls us in accord with how He's made us. Again, getting feedback from other people, getting input, looking at steps you took that maybe were missteps. Maybe you overestimated yourself in an area.
So when we have failure, as you're saying, we want to analyze the situation, use our resources, consider whether to keep moving forward or perhaps that's not what we're to be pursuing. But that brings up some spiritual issues as well. Satan loves to get a foothold when we find ourselves down in the dumps and cause us to feel discouraged and defeated and maybe sometimes resentful and angry. The other person got the job. The other person got the promotion. No one bought the book. Those are not good times, and we can feel a sense of injustice sometimes. So we really have to be careful in those times of failure to step back and really remember our perspective, that God calls us to pursue and do what he calls us to do, but we need to trust him with the results of it. It's for his glory, his plan, his honor, and if it doesn't work out the way we wanted, of course it's disappointing, but we're trusting in him to use those results the way he would, and accept that. Well, thank you for tuning in today.